Hello and welcome to Purely Academic, your potentially educational podcast for the month of January 2025. I am Dr. Jonathan Lack. I write about movies, I teach film at the University of Colorado, and I am officially very frazzled right now.
And I am Mr. Sean Chapman, high school English teacher by day, otaku by night, and I am also officially frazzled because I have to go back to work tomorrow.
I'm sorry, Sean. My classes do not start until the 13th. I do have a meeting for HR stuff tomorrow for onboarding. So, and then I'm working furiously to get PowerPoints ready and everything, and it's been frazzling. I am frazzled for a couple of reasons.
You're way more frazzled than me. You have a lot of shit that's been going on.
I've had a lot of shit. So our show and tell this week, or this month when we get there, is going to be a lot of stories from my life, because at the end of December, I traveled out to Iowa for my graduation, where I officially became Dr. Jonathan Lack. So I am done with that. Then I hurried back here, and I've been moving into a new place. My brother, his lease was up, and he was getting kicked out of his place, and I needed a new place, and he kind of lived anyway on the kind of Westminster-ish side of town where I need to be to go to Boulder, which is where I'm going to be working starting this month. So we decided to get an apartment together, and we found a good place. But we've been moving in, and it's been a little hectic and back and forth. And I was down visiting my parents, and I had done last night because it was my mom's birthday, and we were doing something for her. And I had brought my laundry because our laundry machines here aren't quite working yet. And we've had a work order in for that. And then I got here to do the podcast this morning, Sean, and realized I left all the laundry back at home. So I need to drive back down after this podcast. And I'm getting ready to teach 2 classes, one of which is our giant 150-person intro to film. So dealing with all of that, if you're wondering why I sound a little frazzled, that is it. And if I sound a little different than normal, new space. It's nice. I think it's good, and it's going to be fine for podcasting. I'm at the same desk I've been at since... Sean, I've had this desk since we were in the condo in Boulder together in 2013.
I've helped move that desk then.
You have helped move this desk? This desk I got for $25 because it was a show model they were about to get rid of at Office Depot, and it has stuck around for 12 years now. So sometimes you get a good deal.
Well, that's a lot of value there. I'm curious, Jonathan, what percentage of your internet are you getting access to now that you're not in your parents' house?
Have we talked about that on the podcast yet?
I don't know. I think that was in the space between Purely Academics.
Yeah, I mean, we recorded some of them doing this, but yeah, so I had been living for the last couple months at my mom's house just while because I had to leave Iowa, and then I was waiting to see where I would be next. So I was with her, and their internet just started going out. And it was a really weird thing, because it wasn't 100% of the time it was bad. It was very intermittent, but it would get really, really awful, and particularly in different places in the house. And not in a sometimes you get a bad signal here. I mean, it was fine for years, and then it was bad, right? And part of that is it started affecting the podcast. So the last couple episodes we've recorded, some of which are Japanimation Station ones that aren't out yet, I had to daisy chain, and I was recording it off the 5G connection on my cell phone. And the funny thing is, they have Xfinity, and we're on Xfinity Mobile for cell phone stuff. And so the Xfinity internet was so bad that I was having to use my data plan on Xfinity Mobile, and my data plan on Xfinity Mobile started throttling me for using too much data. So they were just fucking us at both ends. It was amazing. But yeah, no, I was testing it through their Xfinity app, and we were getting at some points 1% of our data speed, 2% of our data speed, what we were paying for. It still is not fixed. I don't know if it will ever be fixed. Technicians have been fucking with us. Finally, we went through basically 2 technicians who both just refused to believe us, because they would come in and test the signal and be like, oh, it's fine. And I'm like, okay, wait 5 minutes, it won't be fine. And then they would learn that I'm correct, because I can read a speed signal. That is not a specialist function. And then finally they checked basically the tap that the cable comes into the house, and it's all fucked up. So there's a work order out to get it fixed, but that work order's been out for a month. And meanwhile, we're getting absolute shit internet that you cannot record a podcast on. I was excited to learn when we moved to this new place. Guess who the only internet provider is at this address? Xfinity.
Is it Xfinity? Yep. They've got their greedy little hands on every little bit of land they can with their internet monopoly.
So it's working so far so good. In fact, it's fine here. It's obviously a much smaller space. My mom has a a house with her husband. This is not a house. This is a little condo we're renting, so it's not as much space to cover. But it seems to be working fine so far. My brother also had a mesh network set up that he brought over here from his old place, and I don't really know how that all works, but he knows how it works, and it seems like it's making everything work better. So internet seems to be fine. You and I are not breaking up so far, and that feels great.
Yes, it was a stressful few podcasts we recorded where it was just like, is Jonathan just not moving, or is the screen frozen for him because the internet is breaking? Like, there's a lot of moments like that of staring. It's like, I'm gonna look. Is he gonna blink while I'm talking? Like, what's happening?
I still haven't edited those last couple Japanimation stations. I have like all the notes saved of where I need to make cuts, but I'm like, some of them, like, it's disheartening when it's like I have to go, because it means you have to resync, and it's just all this shit. It makes the post-production really hard, harder than it needs to be. So that is what I am up to. It's January, it's the new year. You know, it's honestly, it's a lot of exciting stuff going on in my life. This is fun. It's just stressful. And then you got to go back into the salt mines, the ninth grader salt mines, and get them reading their books.
Yep, that's it. I'll just go in there, I'll throw some books at them and say, read, you slimes, and that's my job. You know, it's not as bad. You know, people say that teaching is hard. It's not that hard. You know, you just need a good throwing arm and like a good, voice to just command them. And they just do what they say, and there's never any problems with it. So, you know, it's not so bad.
Well, I'll be dealing with a full lecture hall of college freshmen, so I'm sure nothing stressful will happen.
No, yes, nothing stressful. There won't be anything unexpected. It will just be totally normal and uneventful.
Can I tell you something that made me so happy, Sean? What? I was looking at the past syllabi for this class, and the last two professors at Colorado who taught this class both barred all electronic devices from their classroom, which meant I could bar all electronic devices from my classroom, and that is a fucking load off my shoulders, because to be able to just say, no, unless you have a disability with disability services, I don't want to see it, makes it, I don't know, that just makes it a lot easier. It just, because it's I find it very distracting when lecturing, if someone's on their phone or doing something they shouldn't be, and I'm like, I can just get rid of all that. And then some colleges don't let you do that, but I guess Colorado, they're fine with it, because the last two people did it.
That's nice. Yeah, like in public education, that is a complicated fight because parents want their kids to be able to have their phones. And that's like with the phone stuff. That's sometimes the most difficult thing, is not the kid having the phone.
Right.
It's like the parent wanting to be able to text their kid at any point during the day. So they're like, but I'm texting my mom. I'm like, I don't care who you're texting. Like, it's like you texting your mom right now is not some sort of life-saving thing that's going to like change the world. Like, put the goddamn phone away.
Yeah. Whatever. Back in our day, Sean, and there were cell phones at our time. We mostly would have been like, I didn't have an iPhone until after high school, but we had flip phones and stuff. But like, if your parent needed you, they called the office, and then the office called the teacher. Like, if there's an actual emergency, like, I assume that is still the system. If there's an actual, and that system, guess what? It's foolproof. It fucking works. There's a person in the office whose job is to take the calls. There's no problem with it.
Yeah, because like, I don't care if your mom texted you that you need to go home. Like, she needs to call the front office, and they need to call me to tell me to let you go. I can't just leave because your cell phone says mom at the top, and it's like, you need to get home right now. It's like, that's not how this works.
It is something, as I've been putting my syllabi together, I've been thinking a lot about that there are some things that just work, and just because we have new ways of doing it doesn't make those ways better. And like, one of them is there are, I have to take attendance for my big lecture, obviously. And there are lots of ways you can do it digitally. And the way Colorado has is that you can put up like a QR code in the classroom. And then for the first 5 minutes, kids can get their phones out and scan the QR code and then go into this app and record their attendance. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be spending the first 5 minutes of my classes doing that. I'm going to have sign-in sheets. Because you know what? It's a lot of paperwork, but it works. Sign-in sheets don't fail. There's no fail point on the sign-in sheet. No one's app will break down with the fucking pencil in their initials. There's stuff like that where I'm like, maybe paper's fine. Maybe we can just use the paper. It's fine.
Yeah, unless you are using like something, there's like things like Pear Deck, which allow people to like participate in Google Slides and stuff. If you're using something like that, then electronically it makes sense. Yes. But if all you're doing is having like a check-in sheet with a QR code, no, that's a nightmare. You only want people using technology when you are doing something with the technology. If you're not doing something big with it, keep it out and just give them paper. It's way better.
Yeah, no, I've been thinking about that a lot because I've seen, obviously this is kind of interesting for me teaching intro to film because I've taken it as a student and I've TA'd for, I believe, 4 different people who've taught it. So, and that's 4 different people, and usually I taught with them more than once. So I've seen it done many times. So it's been a lot of like, well, what did I see that worked and what did I see that didn't? And then there's also the stress of now, if it doesn't work, I don't get to complain. I don't get to complain and say, oh, the professor did a stupid thing. I'm the professor now. So if my ideas don't work, that's on me. I wonder if it was like that for you a little bit, like coming out of student teaching of like, now I get to do it. Oh shit, now I have to do it.
Oh yes, it is. That is absolutely the feeling. Is like, oh fuck, it's that like the buck stops here kind of idea.
Yeah.
Obviously, technically, you have like administrators and stuff like that, but really, for your day to day, it is you. You're the top person, and it stops there, and you have to deal with whatever the bullshit is.
Yeah, easy to judge from the back of the classroom. Harder to do it from the front. All right.
Yeah. To be fair, I was never as judgmental as you were. This is maybe like a bigger life realization for you, Jonathan, at least based on our high school experience.
Oh, well, in high school I was, No, I don't know if I was super judgmental with, like, the people I was TAing for. It's more that but you do learn, like, what works and what doesn't, and you see them experimenting, too, with stuff, and you see it, and you see stuff that's like, okay, sometimes it would be like, I would never do it this way, but I don't think this is a bad way to do it. It's just not the way I would do it. But that's why it's important to have some kind of apprenticeship period with teaching, I think, right?
Everyone has their own style. You'd have to see what are kind of the things out there and how do you adapt it to what works for you.
But no, it's going to be fun. One of my classes is called the one that I have specifically developed. It's a 4,000 level. It's called Animation and Identification, and it is a lot of themes that I developed working on my dissertation because I had 2 months to put this together. So it's like let's go with that. But it's going to be really cool, and it's going to have about 50-50 Japanese animation and American animation in it. And the American animation is mostly shorts because I think that, to me, is the tradition that American animation is most significant in, is the shorts of the first half of the 20th century. For Japanese animation, there is some good Kyoto animation representation there. We're doing A Silent Voice as our first movie. We're doing, from other purely Japanimation Station stuff, we're doing a Dororo week, which you'll hear that episode later this year on Japanimation Station. So it's a fun one. It's going to be a lot of podcast representation in the class. That's
exciting. And Silent Voice, I think that's going to be a hit. I think it's such like a good movie that anyone can enjoy, even if it's very sad.
Yeah, it's why I made it the first big one, because that's when we're introducing the themes of like, what is identification in cinema? How do we see ourselves in movies? And I just thought, it's a silent. That's the right one. That's the one that's going to prompt discussion. Like, it's because that is a movie about seeing people. So I think that's the way to do it. Any time I can teach Yamada Naoko, I'm going to teach Yamada Naoko because she's a genius. So there you go. In terms of housekeeping, over on Fade to Lack, jonathanlack.com, lots of stuff. I had a full flurry of year-end reviews, which was fun. I reviewed several new movies, including Robert Eggers' Nosferatu and the Bob Dylan biopic, A Complete Unknown. That review is actually kind of blown up, which has been interesting. I've been getting a lot of comments on it. Have you seen the Robert Eggers' Nosferatu yet, Sean?
No, I want to see it. I've seen all of his other movies, but like I kind of like his movies at home a little bit more. Is kind of what I found, and I like watching them with my dad.
That's fair,
because I've seen all of them with my dad, and so I'm just going to wait for that to get either on streaming or I'll probably just buy it. Yeah, I've got all of his other movies, so. But yes, I'm very excited to see it.
No, it's going to, and that one will be a workout for your OLED TV because it has very deep contrasts. So that's a good choice. But yes, no, it's great. You're going to love it. It has one of the best Willem Dafoe performances ever as basically the Van Helsing character, and it couldn't be more perfect. So loved that. And then I had my top 10 films of the year. So you can go read or listen to that, because I also put that out in the purely academic feed, which was me reading the basically the script that I had written for that. So you can listen to it if you don't like reading. And there you go. So that's what's going on there. In terms of the paid content on Fade to Lack this month, I haven't nailed down the exact schedule yet, for all the reasons we've mentioned so far. The being frazzled. I do know I took New Year's Day off, but this week there should have been a piece on Yojimbo and Sanjuro, the Kurosawa films films with Toshiro Mifune, and I decided to put that piece out because they're coming out on 4K from Criterion this week. So I thought a little bit of synergy there. We're doing Tokyo Story next week, and I have penciled in, I want to do 2 more kind of Japanese classic films. So one of them might be Sancho the Byleth. One of them might be Mr. Thank You. We'll see. I have a couple in mind, but it depends on what I have time to write. So that is what's coming over there. Anything you want to mention, Sean, before we move forward?
For housekeeping, no, I don't have housekeeping stuff. I just record podcasts and I go to work, and that's it.
All right, you want to do some show and tell?
Yes, Jonathan. What are we doing here for show and tell today?
All right, well, we'll do our normal, like, what have we been watching a little bit later, but I thought maybe I should just tell the stories of what I've been doing. I did some of it already, but yeah, I mean, my show and tell has been, I haven't been, like, watching a ton of stuff. I haven't even had a TV set up, really, for the last week that I could watch stuff, so I've been doing stuff elsewhere. The kinds of games I've been playing are the kinds of games you can play in short bursts while not thinking about other things. But yeah, I had the trip out to Iowa, so we went for graduation. That was nice. I actually never did my full graduation at Colorado. I just did my department had a ceremony, but this was the actual, like, doctoral commencement ceremony, which is its own ceremony at University of Iowa. Over the graduation week, I think they go in order of doctoral, master, bachelor. So this was the first one. It was at 9 a.m. on a Friday. The trip out was nice. We drove, and we did not have any snow or problems or anything. It was like one of the smoothest drives to and from Iowa I've ever had, so that was very nice. And then I had to go pick up some big silly robes and stand in a line and get all that. I will say, and anyone listening to this who has been through academia might think this was silly or weird of me, but I didn't know the whole tradition, that part of the doctoral ceremony is that you get hooded, which is part of the garb, is like this big hood they put on you, and it's not a hood you like wear up. It like goes over your back and it like almost goes down to the floor. But the tradition, I guess, is that the dissertation advisor comes with you and does the hooding. I hadn't gotten that memo. I'm not sure where I was supposed to get that memo. My dissertation advisor is also retired, so I didn't even know if he was in town. So I didn't do that. So someone else like had to do it for me, but I did feel like the weird ugly duckling because I was the person without a faculty advisor on stage. But that's fine. There was, I think, 1 or 2 other people that were in that boat. But, communication was never the best part of my University of Iowa experience. Other wonderful things, not like people telling you what you needed to do. Not a good part of the University of Iowa experience.
Yeah, that's always that really awkward thing where, like, it's those kinds of traditions where, like, everyone just assumes that everybody knows it. And
Yes.
so nobody ever tells anyone. And it's like, well, if you don't have someone who's told it to you, or like whatever process that gets passed down, it's so easy to miss that kind of stuff.
I'm also the first person in my family who's done this. Like my direct, like
Right.
I have relatives further along the line, but not that I would have been at their ceremony or anything. So like this was the first ceremony like this I'd ever been to. My Uncle Ron did later in life get a doctor in divinity. He was a preacher in the Episcopalian Church, and I went to his ceremony. But a doctoral ceremony for like the Episcopalian Church is quite a bit different from like
Yes.
the arts and sciences. But it was funny. I was also the only film studies person there. So most of them, it would be like a department where like physics had like 6 PhDs and the same advisor for all of them, and they were all so happy. And I'm like, I'm the only film studies. It was weird. I was between all these like bioengineering people, and it was hilarious. We also had, I think, about 30 physical therapists getting their PhD that day. I guess they do those in batches, but there was a whole block of people getting physical therapy PhDs. So I was like, man, if anyone like hurt their back at this ceremony, they would have lots of options for what to do next.
There you go. Hey, there's nothing wrong with physical therapy. We need more of those.
Yes.
I'll take one.
But while we were out there, we did wind up going to see a movie because there was one day where we just didn't have a ton going on. So my brother and my cousin Tony, who is a little older than us but is one of our favorite cousins, and she comes to stuff with us, we wanted to go. We always go see movies together. The only thing that was like good for all of us was we went to see Sonic the Hedgehog 3. And I will say, though, that was the afternoon of the graduation, and I had been keeping it together pretty well up to then, but after the graduation happened, all, like, my fatigue from the week hit me, and I did fall asleep at the point in Sonic the Hedgehog 3 where Sonic and Shadow become friends, And so I went to sleep, and they were fighting on the moon. And then I woke up, and they were friends, and Live and Learn started playing. And I'm like, this is cool, but I leaned over to Thomas and I said, why are they friends now? And he's like, the whole flashback with Maria. You didn't say. I'm like, I fell asleep. It's a good movie. I liked it a lot. It's a fun. It was a little surreal to see a movie that is as relatively like straightforward an adaptation of a game, because it's got a lot of Sonic Adventure 2 in it. Not as much as like, maybe I would hope in my dreams. It's not like the Sonic X episodes that do it. But like, he jumps out of the helicopter at the beginning and does the line about like, no TV and no food. I'm out of here. That whole thing. So, they play Live and Learn. The Sonic movies have embraced their inner video game, and it's great. Keanu Reeves, very good Shadow.
Yeah, it's nice to have, like, it feels like the Sonic brand is now at the point where they're mining early 2000s Sonic nostalgia rather than Genesis Sonic nostalgia, which I think Sonic Mania kind of wraps that up. And it's nice, like, between that and Shadow Generations, which I have not finished that game. But I've played a decent chunk of it, and that's very fun. It is also like pulling from that era of Sonic, obviously, where Shadow was like this new, really interesting, important character, and then he kind of went away when the Sonic brand shifted post Sonic 2006. And I'm glad that like Sonic Frontiers has gone a little bit back to that style in terms of the story. This like period where the Sonic brand was like very like kiddied up, right? Like Sonic is for kids, absolutely, but it was never a like but it's for dumb kids thing, that's
right.
Like the kind of thing that like it felt like that's what the brand went for a long time. Is like, we're making it for kids that we think are idiots, rather than like, yeah, it's for kids, but it's for kids that we think are cool, which is what the brand used to be.
Yes.
Until like 2008 or so. And I'm glad that they're back there. They're back like, no, we're making this for kids who we think are cool. So it's got like heavy metal and shadows in it, and Sonic is cool and not just like a dumbass, which is kind of what his characterization was for a while. And it seems like that's kind of where the Sonic movies, which I've not seen any of those movies, but like I watched the clip where he turns supersonic at the end of the second movie, and that seemed cool. I'm like, I don't know if I need to watch the whole movie, but like these movies seem cool, and I'm glad that they exist, and Sonic as a brand seems to be in like a much healthier place than it had been in a very long time.
Well, they've embraced the fact that it's always been a multimedia brand. Sonic is easier to do in movies and TV because its characters are so vivid and because its world is pretty plastic. You can do Sonic comes to our world, or you can do Sonic is on his world doing freedom fighting. You can do Sonic in the comics loses his children or something. I've seen the panel where he's crying because his wife died or whatever. But like, you can do a lot with Sonic, and I do like the new movies. I think for one, Jeff Fowler, the director, he's the guy I think Marvel wishes they had, because he's really good at keeping movies moving, under 2 hours, fun. He's really good with special effects. Like, those movies obviously have a lot of effect shots because Sonic and his friends are CGI, and they look good. They don't look perfect, but they look much better than any Marvel movie. And like, I do think like he's kind of the ideal of this kind of Hollywood director, where like he can do the assignment but also do it with some panache. And I think a lot of people cannot do that. But then also, like, I like that those movies are for kids. But they're for, as you say, they're not for the dumb kids in the audience, or we shouldn't say for the dumb kids. It's not adults thinking kids are dumb. It's adults thinking, what can we do to make the kids have fun? And I like that. I think Sonic, if I were to see a Sonic thing that felt like it was trying to narrowcast to me, 32-year-old man, I would think that was wrong, because that's not what Sonic is. Sonic should perpetually be for, I think, slightly 12-year-olds who think they're kind of edgy is what Sonic should probably be for. And I think the movies do a good job at that. I also want to say my favorite thing in Sonic 3 is how they decided to integrate the Chow into the world of Sonic. Is they go to Tokyo and they're at a restaurant, and it's a mascot cafe with Chow, and it's called the Chow Garden, and the Chow go on stage and do a little dance in their big mascot costumes. That was brilliant, because that's like, I don't know how you would actually put the Chow into this like story in like a real way, but like that's a thing where you can look at that and go, I can't believe that's not already a restaurant in Japan, and I thought it was very funny.
Nice. So you said that it was, it pulled a lot from Sonic Adventure 2. Is there just like a solid hour of the movie of Sonic or of Knuckles up in like the Pumpkin Hills and a rap is playing, and he's just like, where the fuck is it? Like, where the fuck do I go? And he's like going in circles, like, I know there's a shard of the Master Emerald here somewhere. Where the fuck, like, God, Jesus.
It is not, but if they do a season 2 of that Knuckles show, I think that's what it should be. It should be like the Endless Eight from Haruhi, but it is just 8 episodes of Knuckles fruitlessly looking for the Master Emerald while somebody raps awkwardly over top.
Yeah, and he's just like, have I been this way before? It looks, everything looks similar, but like everything in here looks the same. Like, I think I've been here. God damn, where the fuck is this last shard? Fuck.
Yes. So, good stuff. Sonic is fun. One other thing I'll say I've been doing, because this this has been something I got into that has been really great to have while I've been traveling and moving and just a lot of the time sitting around with nothing but my phone, is I've started reading the Solo Leveling comic, the Korean webtoon that the anime is based on. Have you ever read a Korean webtoon, Sean?
No, I've never like properly read one. Like I've sort of like read a little bit of a couple of them and never really got, like I read a little bit of the Tower of God one. I think that's what it's called, that the Crunchyroll had a series of. But I never like got deep into anyone.
Because it's interesting, because this genre of comics, sometimes called manhwa, it's very different than manga. Manga is like, to this day, very old school attitudinally. Mm-hmm. It is done on pages, even if you read it on your, iPad or whatever, you're reading it in pages. The organization of the page is very important to manga. But this kind of like modern webtoon has come up in a different era where it's been basically made for phones and computers. And so the Solo Leveling comic, which is, hyper popular all over the world, like you can go get book versions of it. And that's what I started. I was like looking at it at Barnes & Noble and like looking at the book and like, oh, this looks cool. But I had 2 problems. One, I cannot read comics left to right. It's just hard for me. I learned to read comics with manga. It's hard for me even with American comics. A little easier, but like, Korean comics look enough like manga that when it wants me to read left to right, I can't do it. It's hard. But also the paneling is weird because it wasn't made to be arranged on pages. Mm-hmm. It's a webtoon. It's meant to be scrolled on your phone, basically panel by panel. And so I did find downloads of the original webtoon versions and put them in the Panels app on my phone, and I've been reading it that way. And I'm about 50 chapters in, which is about where the first season of the anime ends, which means the anime will probably be 4 seasons because it's about 200 chapters. So that would be my guess is how long that anime is going to have to go. But it's really cool. One, it's a great series. I mean, I liked the anime a lot, and I understand why the comic was a big hit reading it. The anime is a very close adaptation. But it's a different kind of comic than I've ever read. And I like how it is arranged for the phone because it's entirely dependent on verticality. It's a single panel at a time, but some of those panels are really like vertically long and you scroll through. And so the equivalent of like a big splash page in this kind of comic is you're scrolling several times through one giant panel that keeps going. Like there's one moment where the main character Jinwoo, I think it's one of the big battles he has with like, I think it's when he goes into the S-rank gate and he can't get past the gate, but he does like the first enemy he encounters and he almost dies, but he like rallies and, uses his wits and fights. But like the big fight, what is probably like a montage in the anime is just a long scrolling sequence where it's him fighting in different poses over the course of this scrolling. And I find moments like that really cool. I think part of the reason why the first little arc of Solo Leveling before he gets his new powers, where it's all the big statues are fighting them, is because statues are big, scary, and vertical, and so there's all these big vertical panels of the scary statues. It's a really neat form of comics, and like you can definitely tell Solo Leveling is a pretty virtuosic one in terms of, I think, how it uses this paneling system, and is probably why it has turned out to be so popular. It isn't just the story being told, which is taken from a light novel, or the Korean equivalent of you know what I mean.
Yes.
A Korean web novel. It's taken from that, but the comic is drawn by someone else. And it's just really cool. I've been having a lot of fun with that. And I just wanted to mention that because we like to talk about manga and stuff here. And I had not delved into the Korean side of things. So if people have recommendations, let me know. Because I do think this is fun. And it's also just very convenient to just have on your phone. So it's like, oh, I've got 5 minutes. I can read a chapter of Solo Leveling and not have to go get something else out. Because this is the way it was actually meant to be read.
Yeah, and I do really like that format because it's something where, I got a little bit into like digital American comic books in like 2011, 2012-ish. I started reading more and kind of, because that's when they started, like, you had Comixology and then like DC and Marvel both came out with their own apps that are obviously like really big now. and it was like cool to read them that way. But it always felt a little awkward. And it was like me reading them on my phone. One of the reasons I got into it at that point was because I was living in the dorms at Boulder. And so it was like a kind of like your thing. It's like convenient to be able to read it that way, where I don't have space to just keep a shit ton of like physical comic books around. I don't necessarily have money to buy a bunch of physical comic books and all that kind of stuff. Or like a car at that point, even to go buy one. And so, yeah, it was like cool to read them that way, but it also was awkward of like, do I like, because there's a panel by panel view, and I do that where it just is sort of like you scroll through and it just gives you one panel at a time, or do I do a page and just like zoom in and use my finger to scroll around? And I do like the like way that the manhwa or these kind of web comics work that are built for that format, where it's like, no, you're not trying to adapt a like traditional comic book page and traditional comic book paneling into a like phone format. It is just its own thing, and you're thinking on it on a panel by panel level. Whereas if you're doing the panel by panel view for traditional American comic books, sometimes it'll work fine, but you always hit a couple of pages where it just doesn't break down that way. It doesn't make sense to consume the information literally one isolated panel at a time, because the artist is thinking about how does the page constructed. You're losing a lot of information if you're not seeing it that way. So it is cool to have like this own version of comic books that exists in that format, in that medium, that's thinking about that as the artistic presentation layer, rather than trying to cram a regular book format into a like iPhone screen.
Yeah, and it's cool that, because, American comics, Japanese comics, they have this like such a long-standing tradition. There's kind of not room to make something new, I don't think, in that sense. And it seems like the Korean market in the 2000s found a very kind of new way to express this, and that's awesome. So it's always neat. So that's been fun. Sean, why don't you pick something from your list and tell us what you've been doing?
All right, so I've got two things here I want to talk about. One is just something I've wanted to mention for a while. We just have had like packed podcasts where I haven't had sort of space to do it.
Yes.
And that's Ultraman Tiga. I want to catch up with my Ultraman journey, because the last time I talked about Ultraman stuff on the podcast, well, is every podcast. It's my new Naruto. It's like the thing I randomly reference because I'm constantly watching it, and so it was constantly on my mind when we're watching anime or something, like, oh, this is like that episode of Ultraman, or this is like that thing. But the last time I really talked about it in depth was Ultraman 80, which I think that was the first purely academic that I talked about that on. And so Ultraman Tiga, which I have finished, and I watched the movie, that's kind of like an extra finale for the series. And I'm now like about halfway through the next show after that, which is Ultraman Dyna. But Tiga is the show that came in the mid-90s and brought Ultraman back from its very long, like 15-year hiatus after Ultraman 80 kind of shit the bed because it was not a good show. But also this kind of show was just not popular in the 80s. They weren't making movies like this for most of the 80s either. And so Ultraman Tiga comes back at the tail end of like the Heisei era of Godzilla movies, where those come in really in 1989 with Godzilla vs. Biollante, that really kind of like rejuvenates the tokusatsu or giant monster kind of genre. And Ultraman Tiga is great. Like, it is really, really good. It's easily one of the best Ultraman shows I've seen. Like, I would put it up there with Ultra 7, the original Ultraman, and Return of Ultraman, and Leo. Like, that's kind of my, like, the really, really good ones. And this is probably, Tiga, I'd probably say is, like, in the top 3 best Ultramans. Like, it really makes sense why this show was so successful, that Ultraman has never gone away since. Like, it has been a kind of present brand ever since Ultraman Tiga. And Tiga is really impressive as a show because what it does is it holds on to like the core of Ultraman. Like, it is very recognizably Ultraman in terms of the structure of individual episodes, the kinds of plot lines it tackles, the overall elements of the show are all clearly Ultraman. Like, they're not sort of trying to reinvent the wheel or anything, though they do reset the continuity. It's set in its kind of own universe, so you don't have like cameos by Ultra 7 popping up, which all the old shows from the show era were constantly bringing in old Ultramans for a special crossover episode. This like just really kind of brings it back to basics. But the thing that it does is it modernizes it relative to the mid-90s and brings in more serialized elements. And I think it really finds the Goldilocks zone between like, how do we have more kind of involved characters that feel like they develop a bit more and you really invest more in those characters and that kind of longer ongoing plotline elements, while still keeping the show at its core very episodic, and it's still we have 25-minute episodes. Every episode is about a monster showing up, and Ultraman Tiga is going in and beating up the monster. And other than a handful of two-parters, that's what every single episode is. It still is keeping that format sort of like true. And I think it's like a really, really impressive show to watch in that regard. It's just like, as someone who really likes the classic Ultramans, it absolutely threads the needle, and it finds everything that's really good about the classic shows and executes those things at a really high level, while also making the cast of characters a lot richer than any of those old shows did. Other than maybe Ultraman Leo is the only one that really invested in its main cast, but it also did that by boiling the main cast down to essentially 2 characters for most of the show, whereas Ultraman Tiga is a big ensemble show like all the classic Ultramans. So Ultraman Tiga, it's really good. I would highly recommend it. I think it's of the ones I've seen, I would say it's the easiest Ultraman to get into. If there's someone who's like been hearing me talk about Ultraman and wants to watch one of the shows, but is maybe turned off by like the cheesiness of the really old ones, and they are incredibly cheesy. Like, I can totally understand how someone could like find it very hard to get into those shows, which have like little kids singing the main theme. Like, that's not going to be for everybody. Ultraman Tiga is a little bit more modern in some of those sensibilities, so I think it'd be more accessible to people. Especially if you're someone who like grew up in the 90s, you'll be very familiar with the kind of like special effects and stuff like that and the overall kind of mood of the show. It's a very 90s TV show, although in a way I think like is really good. And so Ultraman Tiga gets 2 thumbs up. It's a great show. It also has a fantastic finale. The finale of Ultraman Tiga just is like fantastic. It brings in all these like minor characters that popped up in individual episodes, kind of all come back at the end with this big 2-parter, and they're all like have their own little role to play in having Ultraman Tiga come back. And there's a great kind of message about like the future and children being the spirit of light that empowers Ultraman and all this kind of stuff. It's great. So Ultraman Tiga, absolutely amazing. 2 thumbs up. I highly, highly recommend it. Again, if you're someone who's a little turned off by the super old school style of the old like 60s, 70s Ultramans, I think Ultraman Tiga would be a very good show to watch to see if you are into it. And you can get it super cheap as well on DVD. And it's on streaming as well. So if you want to see that, Ultraman Tiga, it rules. And about halfway through Ultraman Dyna, it also rules. I'll talk about Ultraman Dyna when I finish it, though. But my easy pitch of Ultraman Dyna is it is like a Gundam sequel in that they like sort of find the way of like, let's take all the main characters and kind of make them the mirrors of the main characters of the previous show, and the way that like Camille is kind of like a mirror of Amuro and stuff like that. And that's one of the things that's very fun about Ultraman Dyna is the characters are all kind of the opposite of what they were in the previous show in order to distinguish them, and the show does a good job there.
I always like to check the price of the Ultraman DVDs while you're talking about these, because they're always hilariously low. And Ultraman Tiga you can get on Amazon for $13, which is 26 cents an episode. So I did find, as I was moving, I did unpack the Ultraman DVDs I do have, or Blu-rays. I have the first couple of steelbooks they put out of, I think, Q, Ultraman, Ultra 7, and I think Return of Ultraman. So someday I need to go through all those, because this sounds very fun.
It is very, very fun. The other thing, I don't get to talk about this super in-depth, but I wanted to bring it up because we've talked about this on a purely academic, is for Christmas, I got for my dad, but also half for myself, the Shout Factory collection of Showa-era Gamera movies, which is all the original Gamera movies from Gamera up to Super Gamera, which is the terrible one that like is mostly stock footage. I have not seen all of them yet, but I've seen about half of them. The last one I watched was Gamera versus Giron, which is fun. That's the one that people might know because it's heavily referenced in a episode of Dexter's Laboratory. Did a like parody of Gamera versus Giron, because Giron is the monster that is just basically a giant knife. Like he's just a big lizard dude with a giant knife head, and Dexter's Lab did a parody episode where there's like a giant monster that's like a giant axe, basically, and it's a whole thing. But yeah, the classic Gamera
oh my god, the posters for this movie are awesome because of that. Oh my, I love the Japanese poster. It's Gamera breathing fire as the knife head guy, Giron, is coming down at the fire. And then there's like humans in like weird little alien helmets on the side. I love old kaiju posters. They're ridiculous.
Yes, they're ridiculous, and they're very fun. And it's been fun watching these movies because I never properly went through them. Like, I've seen a lot of the old Gameras because they were on TV, right, when I was a kid, and the way that like old Godzilla movies were. So I've never seen any of the old ones in Japanese in like good sort of like proper quality. And so it has been interesting watching them. especially because the first three Gamera movies, if you're into these kinds of movies, are pretty good. And then it does like dramatically go off of a cliff immediately after the third one, which is also where the Daiei, the film studio, is like dying and is like on the verge of going bankrupt, and will then eventually go bankrupt to the point where the penultimate classic Gamera movie is not even actually released by Daiei because Daiei went bankrupt during its production. And so it's interesting, like it is a kind of Hail Mary by a dying studio to be like, we got to get something popular out there, and they got enough popularity to hold on for a few years. But yeah, the first three Gamera movies are pretty fun, particularly the third one, Gamera versus Gauss, which is obviously sort of the template for when they do the reboot Gameras, which we talked about, the Heisei era movies. There's actually a lot more than I remembered that is pulled directly from the first Gamera versus Gauss. There are a lot of beats, like Gamera grabbing onto Gauss's leg and Gauss having to laser it off with its sonic beam. That happens in the old movie too. And I had forgotten that there's that many callbacks in the new ones, or the relatively new ones. they're old movies now. But yeah, so those first three ones, they're very, very fun. You know, they're not as good as I think the equivalent Godzilla movies of the period. You know, the special effects are not quite as good. I don't think they're quite as well directed, but they're a lot better than I remembered. And partially because my memory is watching the bad American cuts with English language dubs and watching them on like a tube TV over broadcast network. So it's like, you know, that's not like a great format to actually appreciate the movies.
They also probably would have been cropped. Are these were these like CinemaScope movies? So
yes.
Okay. Yeah. So you were also seeing about a third of the image.
Yeah. So it's that it was the same thing that when I went back and I got with the Criterion collection of the old Godzilla movies, watched a lot of the old ones I remembered not being very good. And I was like, this actually is pretty good. Like, they're not as good as like the best Godzilla movies, but they're totally fun. And they're not like cheap movies. They're not like kind of garbage movies, which I think is the reputation some of those 70s era Godzillas have. And I think they have that reputation because nobody had seen them in good quality in the West, at least, for a very long time until Criterion like got them all together in one big set and released it. And that's kind of what this set is with Gamera as well. It's a really nice set. There's a shit ton of bonus features I have not even gotten. I've only watched the movies. I haven't gotten into any of the bonus feature stuff. Every movie has a bunch of bonus features. But the funny thing is when you get to the fourth one, which is Gamera versus Virus, immediately you see like the budget just go to shit. It has a whole very long sequence in the middle of the movie where the aliens are like, we need to study Gamera in order to figure out how to defeat him. Let's look at the monitor. And then the camera zooms in on the monitor, and then you're just watching about 15 minutes of footage from the old the Gamera movies from the previous three. And you're like, oh, this is like anime filler, like you're in the middle of Naruto and it's like, okay, we're doing the flashback scene with Sasuke for the 50th time because we can't do any new material. It's like the pacing is absolutely shit. There's like what is there that is new footage is decent in that movie, but it's so bogged down by sequences of the aliens on the ship who have taken control of Gamera very conveniently being like, go Gamera, destroy that dam. And then they just show a sequence from Gamera versus Gauss where Gamera blows up a dam or whatever. And then they're like, and this is something I didn't think the movie would do. Because it's like, well, you know, yeah, there's a lot of reusing footage, but there's no way they're going to reuse footage from the first Gamera movie because the first Gamera movie's in black and white. So, you know, that would be weird. And they're like, and now Gamera, go and destroy Tokyo, go. And then they just show like 10 minutes from the first Gamera movie where before he's a good guy and he's just destroying Tokyo. And they're like, go destroy the Tokyo Tower. And they're just commanding him. And then they just show sequences from the movie.
And it's still in black and white. They didn't colorize it or anything.
Oh, no. Okay. Yeah, it's just here's black and white. It's the Gamera looks very different because it's a different costume. It's so like, man, they just ripped all the budget away from these movies. I mean, I imagine there's probably a fan edit online. I should go check. That because there's like, if you had like just like a 35-minute Gamera special that was just all the original footage from that movie, it would be totally fun and entertaining. Like the fight at the end is really good. I don't know how Gamera survives the fight at the end because he gets completely impaled through the fucking stomach because the monster's like a big octopus thing with a big spiky head, and he just rams through Gamera and then just like play the footage back and forth over and over again, so he just gets rammed through his sternum with blood gushing everywhere like 5 times.
Oh,
the
God.
Gamera movies are very violent. That's the thing that the new Gamera movies picked up from the classics, is that the knife dude is a knife dude because he dissects a fucking other Gauss to show how badass he is. There's a Gauss, and he, like, cuts him into, like, his head off and cuts him to little pieces and laughs as he does it. It's like, as goofy and kiddie as the movies are, with, like, little kids being the heroes in all of them, other than the first one, they are very violent. So the Gamera movies, I'm excited to watch the last couple. I've got 3 left to watch. They're not like great giant monster movies, but honestly, there aren't that many giant monster movies that aren't Toho Godzilla movies. Like, it's a kind of like slim pickings if you're going outside, certainly like the Toho family, broadly speaking. And so Daiei is one of the only studios from that period to try it. And they got 3 really good ones. Like, those first 3 ones are really fun movies. And I can definitely recommend those very heartily. It's after that it's more of maybe an acquired taste, if you have to be willing to stomach through some, like, very slow sequences using old footage from older Gamera movies and just kind of let your eyes glaze over for a little bit, or fast forward if you want to, before you get to the new stuff. But I'm happy that I'm, like, finally, like, actually sitting down and watching these and kind of appreciating them in good quality.
Have you seen that Criterion is starting to dip their feet into the waters of 80s Godzilla? They're doing Godzilla vs. Biollante on 4K in March.
Oh, no, that's awesome, because that's, like, the one that just you couldn't get, because I think it's Miramax had the rights to that one.
Okay, yeah.
Like, Godzilla vs. Biollante has always been weird because a different studio had the rights from when it came out over here. And so that's the only one I don't have on Blu-ray, because if you want to get the Blu-ray version of that movie, it's incredibly expensive.
Yes,
so I did not know that. That's great.
Yeah, because I know the 80s ones are spottier in release history anyway. But yeah, that was the one that never had anything. And so who knows if they'll do more Godzilla after this. But Toho has gone through and done all their 4K masters of the different ones. They did put out the 4K of the original 54 Godzilla, and then they're doing this one in March. So that's some good stuff.
Yep, it's good eating if you're a fan of giant monster stuff. There's a lot out there.
Yes. Completely switching gears, there's one thing I wanted to talk about before we move on to. We are going to talk about the Doctor Who Christmas special. For those wondering, why haven't it's January? It's the weekly stuff / purely academic podcast. Why aren't they talking about Doctor Who yet? We'll get there. We saw it. We'll talk about it. One other thing I want to talk about is the one show I have managed to watch in the last couple of weeks, because it's on streaming and I could easily work it in around other things. There was no particular reason other than this had been on my list forever to watch, is the Danny McBride show Vice Principals. Danny McBride is the guy who him and David Gordon Green and Jody Hill have done a ton of things together, including, Danny McBride and David Gordon Green did those Halloween movies that we talked about. But they also have made 3 TV shows now. They've done Eastbound and Down, Vice Principals, and The Righteous Gemstones, all of which have their different kind of like cult pockets of pretty heavy acclaim, but I hadn't watched any of them yet. Vice Principals had always been on my list because it's only 2 seasons. There's like a lot of people I follow who swear by this show, and also it has Walton Goggins as the co-lead. And Walton Goggins is like one of our greatest living character actors, I think it's fair to say. He's also someone who has just impeccable taste, and basically anything he's in is worth watching. And I did watch this show, and it is absolutely fucking incredible. Have you ever seen this? Just wondering, Sean?
No, like so much so that like I've like now that you say the HBO show, I'm like, oh right, yeah. But I saw this was on our outline. I'm like, what the fuck has been going on with Jonathan and a vice principal? Like,
yeah,
and, as a high school teacher, like when I see the word vice principal, I think like actual vice principals. I'm like, what the fuck is like? Well, they don't have vice principals at university. Like, what the fuck is Jonathan going on about?
We don't have principals either. We have like deans and things like that. But anyway, honestly, Sean, you should watch this for Walton Goggins, if nothing else, because I know you have a similar love for Mr. Goggins as I do, because he's the best. He's Boyd Crowder. He's many other wonderful things. But anyway, the thing about the Danny McBride shows, and again, also it's David Gordon Green and Jody Hill are the other people working on these, is that they never get huge critical acclaim at the outset, because the way TV is reviewed is critics get the first couple of episodes, write something, and then if they revisit it, it will be at the finale. But often there's so many shows that if a critic doesn't like the first couple episodes, they don't come back to it for understandable reasons. They have a tough job in this day and age with how much TV is made. And the thing about these Danny McBride shows is they're extremely caustic at the outset, all of them. They're very, like, cringe comedy, heavy, like, black comedy. But the thing that I had always heard from people who stuck with them and loved them is that there's a lot more under the surface, and they start in one place, but they transform over time. There's a lot of change. And Vice Principals was specifically made as it's 2 seasons of 9 episodes each, but they shot it all in one go, and they just aired it over 2 years because they had a plan for one 18-episode show. And that describes this show to a T. It's extremely caustic at the beginning. The whole plot is it's these 2 terrible vice principals at this high school, played by Danny McBride and Walton Goggins. Danny McBride is just an asshole who's a disciplinarian and who is mean to everyone, and it is honestly the most realistic depiction of a high school vice principal I have ever seen, based on my time in high school as a student, at least. We had some real fucking assholes back in the day. But anyway, and then Walton Goggins is like the kiss-ass who's kind of trying to get in good. And the show starts with the principal of their school, who is played for a 1-episode cameo by Bill Murray, retiring, and the 2 vice principals both want the job and they start competing for it, but then the district brings in a woman who is like a doctorate and like very celebrated to be the principal, and she's hyper qualified, and these 2 men who have big masculinity issues really want to take her down, and they form a union, and that's kind of where the show starts. It goes to many crazy places after that, again with very caustic cringe comedy at the beginning, but then like the show widens and widens, and it gets increasingly crazy. The first thing that happens is in the 2nd episode, they go to the principal's house to try to learn stuff about her, and they wind up in a fit of rage burning down her fucking house. Like, that's how crazy the show gets right off the bat. But it also gets, like, really interesting because the thing Danny McBride as an actor is really good at, and I don't think I knew this about him until I started watching some of his TV stuff, because I don't think he can do this in movies, is that he can be kind of the broad, loud asshole character, and then over time reveal that there's a lot of, like, kind of broken, guarded humanity underneath. And he's really good at this, but it takes a TV time scale to reveal that. And that's what Vice Principals is very good at. And I think it's and I've heard this about all of his shows, and it's very true of this one, it's very much a show about America in this day and age. This show premiered before Trump was elected the first time, but I would very much consider it a Trump-era show because I think it is about men who feel like they are earned something and having to grapple with the fact that they very much are not, because they are inadequate in large part due to their own shit, not other people's shit, and like coming to terms with that. And I also think it is a show about anger, and it's a show that, like, it also feels very prescient to that it came out before COVID, because it feels like it's very much about if you told me it was about a post-COVID America, I would believe you, because it is so about, I think, the kind of anger that Americans just kind of just melt in as our fucking, like, frog in a boiling pot of water that we're in every day. And I think it reflects that. It's a very funny show also, obviously, but I think it just has a lot of interesting things to say about people, about men, about today's day and age. And I think it is able to do that without ever letting these guys off the hook, but while also recognizing that there's this humanity and that there's a real tragedy in people who are so stuck in their own sense of inadequacy or their own sense of kind of bruised masculinity that they can't enjoy other people, that they can't enjoy what is good about them. And I think that is kind of the main idea of the show. And ultimately what the show is about is these 2 guys becoming friends, and that friendship and companionship being the thing they needed all along, and that opening up to other people is the answer to this some kind of social malaise. And so it's very smart while also being very funny. And it also has one of, like, the 10 best series finales I have ever seen. It involves a tiger mauling people at a school. It's completely batshit insane. But it also has, like, honestly one of the best closing scenes other than Justified, both involving Walton Goggins. Somehow Walton Goggins is at the center of 2 of the very best series finales I've ever seen, and I love that those 2 shows are as different as Justified and Vice Principals, because Walton Goggins, man, he's an eclectic dude.
He is indeed. So, Jonathan, are you telling me that the real vice principals are the friends we made along the way.
That's basically the theme of the show, with a lot of other evil, terrible shit that goes on along the way. It's bizarre. It's unlike anything else, but this is part of the reason I think HBO is awesome, is that they have their big marquee shows that they make all their money on, like Game of Thrones or The Last of Us, or back in the day it was The Sopranos or whatever. One of those shows is better than the others with The Sopranos. But, like, they've always used that to then also make smaller stuff that, like, obviously Vice Principals is not an expensive show, and they only made 18 episodes of it, but they just kind of let Danny McBride do his thing over here, and there's enough of an audience that they keep experimenting in this zone. And I do love that space exists, because I can't imagine this show being made anywhere else, because it is an insane show that, like, if you tried to pitch it, it's a very hard pitch, because the show is a completely different, even though it was 2 seasons made at once, the second season is such a different show. But I love that about it. And also, I don't know how many people would pitch a show of, it's Danny McBride and Walton Goggins as like a weird buddy comedy. It's an insane idea for a show, but I just have to sing its praises again. And I probably wouldn't have even brought it up on the podcast if it weren't for the fact that I truly believe that series finale is like Justified level series finale good. Which I think both you and I probably hold Justified as like the platonic ideal of a series finale. So yeah,
it's about as good as that gets. So
yeah,
that's a very high recommendation.
Yeah, and just anytime I get to gush about Mr. Walton Goggins, I will do it.
Absolutely.
All right, let's talk about a show that Walton Goggins has not been on yet, but he should be one day, because it would be great. Doctor Who. Doctor Who had its annual Christmas special. Well, it wasn't annual for a while there. It's one of the many things Chris Chibnall took away from us. But it is back now. We had last year was basically just the beginning of season 14, which is where we met Ruby Sunday. This is a proper, just one-off, Christmas special written by Stephen Moffat. It's called Joy to the World. And what did you think of this one, Sean? I haven't talked to you about it at all, so I have no idea.
Yeah, I like it quite a bit. Like, I think it's a little bit of a mixed episode. Like, I think it's going for a lot. Like, it's one of those Stephen Moffat episodes that has like 5 episodes worth of ideas crammed into one. That being said, though, I think it is mostly successful. And there's like some stuff in here that's absolutely phenomenal. Like, it just reminds you that, like, Stephen Moffat is, aside from being arguably the best writer for Doctor Who ever, like, he's certainly, like, the best Christmas special dude, because he's done more than anybody. And part of him writing this episode makes you wonder if he just, like, was like, man, Christmas just wasn't Christmas if I didn't, like, cram in an extra episode of Doctor Who somewhere in there. And it is like, really, it was very, like, nice to have that back, to just, like, on Christmas Day be able to watch this episode and be like, yes, Doctor Who's back. And is it a little wonky in pacing in a couple of places? Does the ending go for a big swing that mostly lands but doesn't 100% land for me? Yeah, it's got like a couple of issues, but overall it reminded me, one, Ncuti Gatwa is fucking incredible at this. Like, he's so good.
Yes.
And that also, two, that Doctor Who is a very special TV show that can do a million different things that no other TV show could do, and it can do all those things at the same time and really move you in some very special ways.
Absolutely. I think I agree with that analysis completely. It is not a 100% home run, but it has a couple of 100% home run scenes in it, I think.
Yes.
And overall, it is, and it's the way a lot of Christmas specials, like, are, because the Christmas special is a tough task. It has to be, it's often a completely one-off thing. It often doesn't even have the regular companion in it. And you also have to make it a little more big and boisterous because it's Christmas, it's an hour long, you want it to be a little more special and all of that stuff. And I think Stephen Moffat has always been good at that. There are obviously less good Christmas specials he's done, like The Doctor, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. That one's terrible. But there are other ones that, like, most of his are pretty good. And then he's done a couple of transcendent ones. I think you and I agree his best two are A Christmas Carol and The Husbands of River Song. Those two are just fantastic. But I think this one very much is, like, fits in, like, kind of right under those, where I think it has a lot of great ideas. It particularly just makes great use of the Doctor. This is one of those Moffat scripts where you can hear both very clearly the voice of Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor, the 15th Doctor, but I can also hear lines that are Peter Capaldi's Doctor. There's a lot of Matt Smith in this one that I think is funny. Like, I could see a lot of the 11th Doctor in this one. And so you can just see different faces of the Doctor as he's running around. There's sequences that kind of come out of nowhere that then kind of blow you away. I think the centerpiece of this episode is the Doctor having to spend a year in the hotel while he's waiting to go around and do the bootstrap paradox, and he befriends this woman, and it is just a beautiful short film nestled in this big, crazy Christmas special, and there's no other Doctor Who writer who would write that. That's one of the things that makes Moffat special, is if he has that idea, he'll just do it, and then he'll get back around to where he was going, and he can mostly make it work, even if it's a little messy, and that's part of the magic of it. And I agree. I think the ending, 75% very touching, 25% I'm rolling my eyes a little bit, but I'm also fine with that. That's also something where it's I can totally accept that for the Christmas special in a way maybe I wouldn't if this were episode 5 of a season or something. And overall, yeah, it was delightful. And I agree. I also just want to stress, boy, Ncuti Gatwa is good. There's some uncertainty about the future of Doctor Who because Disney has not ordered more episodes past what they have already made, so it's not clear what it will be doing after this upcoming season, but I really hope whatever it is that Ncuti Gatwa is still there because he is so ludicrously good at this.
Absolutely. And I think it's one of the things that's fun about this episode, and one of the things that's fun about a lot of Christmas special episodes is because of their position, they're these kind of weird mid-season episodes, so a lot of them end up with the Doctor in this fun, companionless kind of mode. And that's always been a thing that I really appreciate about the Christmas specials, is they just give you a flavor of the Doctor you don't get otherwise, because you always otherwise have him amidst some sort of longer ongoing story involving some sort of companion character. And there's a very Tom Baker, the Deadly Assassin quality to a lot of Christmas specials that are so fun, where there's just no, you just get to have another extra adventure with the Doctor and get to see what is he doing in kind of the between times. That I think that's normally a very good thing. I think it has one drawback at how old the reboot, or not reboot, but new Doctor Who is now. Yes. Doctor Who has done this so many times where there is a little bit of a fatigue of how many times do we have to see the Doctor be I can't believe I don't have a companion, and people have to tell him, you really need someone in your life. It's the curse of the show being as old as it is at this point. There's nothing else you could, you can't not do it. You have to do it. It's the only thing that makes sense. At the same time, we have seen that plot beat done about a dozen times. So it's a little bit of a struggle of the ending of this episode, I think, is part of where it struggles, is yes, we have seen this happen a lot with the character, but at the same time, you never see this in any other kind of episode. It's really only in these Christmas specials that you ever get that mode with the Doctor.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, even if you do, you're totally right that this is a thing we have seen several times before. I also do value these parts of the story, though, because this is where I imagine all the Big Finish stories are going on. Is he's in the middle of a run of 45 Big Finish adventures in between seasons where he's living 300 years out in outer space while doing random things. So that's very much where my mind goes to. But yeah, I think particularly when Moffat is doing it, these kinds of things work very well. And I think it's interesting that this episode is kind of bisected, where technically the companion-esque figure is the Nicola Coughlan character, Joy, who is also the title of the episode, Joy to the World. But then you also, the real, emotional centerpiece of the episode is the Anita character, who never even really knows what the Doctor's deal is. He's just a weird dude who lives a year at her hotel. The time travel thing is not something she's even privy to. And I think the two sides of that, if you're going to do yet another story of, boy, Doctor, you're very lonely, you should get a companion, this is a very good way to do it. Because I like how there is the actual, need for connection that he gets with the woman at the hotel, and then the crazy space adventure with the lady who he starts to save, and then she ultimately saves him, which is the Joy character, which is also an archetype we've seen before. And I think those two things joined together, you can see where Moffat's mind kind of took what are several very different episodes and kind of brought them together through that theme. And I think it makes it work in a way that sometimes it doesn't as well with these kinds of episodes.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think the Anita section is it's the heart of the episode. It's the thing that really stands out. And I think one thing I do appreciate it is, as much as some of these kinds of plot beats are things we have seen before, I do think that the way that specific sequence is handled feels very different. And it feels like that's a section that is written for Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor, that it feels like it's very particular to him, because we have seen these kinds of sequences in other Doctor Who episodes before, particularly with Matt Smith had a couple of them where he's had to stay in one place, Power of Three is one. And the 11th Doctor, can't stand it, right? He's like bouncing off the walls. It's driving him fucking crazy to try to stay in one like normal place for too long. And then you also have a little bit of that with like, I think it's the Caretaker, that episode with Peter Capaldi where he's at the school or whatever. And it's a similar kind of quality where it's like he has to stay in one place in order to take care of this longer thing, but he is kind of crazy. He's sort of insane. And every time we've seen the Doctor stay in one place, he completely loses his fucking mind, right? Like the Matt Smith's last episode with the Christmas and all the, like him saving the town of Christmas. That's another one where like, yeah, he's able to stay in one place, but he goes fucking bonkers. Like he completely loses it by the time you come back and see him and he's older and he's talking to the decapitated Cyberman head. It's like this is a Doctor that is not on his best foot. Here, the Doctor kind of like flourishes. Like he's great.
Yes.
Like he's just like chilling out. Like he's like the fucking star of some like indie rom-com movie, you know? Like he's just got such a different energy and this very like real casual friendship he's able to maintain with Anita, and how much kind of like intimacy gets shared between these two people. That's like a thing that we've never really seen the Doctor manage to accomplish. And it does, like, that's one of the things I think that makes that sequence so special is it's really well done. The acting is phenomenal, both with the Doctor and the actress Steph Diwali, who plays Anita, which according to the behind the scenes stuff, this is the first like TV production she's ever been a part of, which is crazy because she's so good in this. But it's like that sequence is so good and it so comes to life. And it also is the thing in the episode that feels like it's unique. Like it is a thing that only I've ever seen this episode of Doctor Who really kind of hit the exact tone that this is going for.
Yes, absolutely. And I think like when you first get into the sequence and you're thinking about it, like, because it's the line about like staying in one place, you do kind of think to yourself, well, we've exactly what you said. Well, we've seen Matt Smith do it. We saw Peter Capaldi do it a little bit. And of course, the 14th Doctor is currently out there doing that with Donna and her family.
Yes.
And depending on how you read the end of the 14th Doctor story, the 15th Doctor has those memories in some way, shape, or form. But I think it's exactly what you say, where I do think it is compatible with all those readings, because this does feel like, if you take our reading of the 14th, 15th Doctor split, where the 15th Doctor came to his moment but does, like, know what the 14th Doctor's future is, I do think this feels like someone who has, like, lived with a family, and this is a different kind of thing, obviously, because this is not... Donna is someone he had known for a very long time and loved that family and all of that. This is a complete stranger in a strange place in a more mundane situation. But I think you can feel that emotional growth there in a way that I like. I do also like their discipline in just not acknowledging the 14th Doctor is out there, because I did go in my head, I go, well, he does have another TARDIS just laying around over in Donna's neighborhood. But again, it is, and Russell T. Davies has said this, that we're not acknowledging that, because that would really ruin kind of Shooty's run if we're constantly going to that. The David Tennant is sitting over here. That Doctor is parked. We're done with him for now. But it did make me think of that.
Yes. Although, that's very much like the Marvel comic book thing of like, well, why doesn't Spider-Man just call the Fantastic Four or Iron Man and have them come down and help him? It's like, they got shit going on. Yes. Don't worry. Don't think about it too much. They got shit going on. It's just don't worry about it.
Yes.
He's got shit going on. It's just, he's busy.
No, I say this not as a criticism. I say it as something that I love, and I love that you think about it, and then you go, I love that they're not acknowledging it, because that's great. Anyway, so it's got all of that. Obviously the key idea of the episode is the time hotel, and the whole idea of the locked rooms that are in hotels that you don't know where they lead, and that's kind of his idea, and they all go to the time hotel, and it's a fun idea. It's, I think it is used in the right kind of way where I'm not sure it's a deep enough idea to really be the meat of the entire episode, but as a setting that you keep kind of coming through and bisecting, it's great. And I think he's used it in the exact right way where we don't go too deep into the mechanics of all of it, but it is a fun setting around which all these things happen.
Yeah, it feels like it's not really like this is not the time hotel episode of the Doctor Who. It feels like an episode of Doctor Who that happens to be taking place in the time hotel, right? Yes. Like it's not like the the time heist episode with Peter Capaldi or something where you have that sense of like, oh, here's this episode is about this concept. The time hotel thing seems relatively incidental to the actual plot line with the star and all that kind of shit. It's just an excuse to get the plot moving along. And I think that is the amount of substance to that idea. It has a nice Doctor Who flavor, but as you say, I don't think it has a a depth to it that an actual episode that's actually about the Time Hotel, I don't know how interesting that would be.
Yeah, but I like it. I like that the Doctor winds up there because he just wants milk for his coffee. And I do love the idea that the Doctor, when he needs milk for his coffee, just parks the TARDIS in random hotels and goes and steals their milk. That I 100% buy. That also feels like the beginning of a Big Finish story to me. That feels like something you'd hear in an audio Doctor Who story.
Yes.
I can imagine the 8th Doctor doing that. You know, I can just there's different ones in my head. Yeah. But I love that little detail. I love how he gets wrapped up in it. I think the character Trev, I think is his name, who is the one who's the really nice guy who seems like he's not, you know, the brightest, the sharpest tool in the shed, but he's very loyal and he's trying to be nice to the Doctor, and then he winds up dying, but then his computerized form saves the day in the end. That's a very sweet through line of the episode.
Yeah, I agree. Although it is like around there with that is where I think you do feel the unwieldiness of this episode, that there's like 3 not companions the Doctor has. There's Trev, there's Anita, and there's Joy. And it's like, that's a lot. That's like a lot for like, and I think that's part of where like the episode gets a bit sort of bogged down when you get to the last third, is like bringing all that together. I think the part of the problem is that Joy as a character never really feels to me solidified. I'm also, now that I'm looking at this on Wikipedia, I realize the character's name is Joy Almondo, and so she's Almond Joy, and I don't think that's ever said in the episode. I don't know if they ever say her last name, or maybe it didn't occur to me, but that's a fucking... I think you know how Stephen Moffat got the kernel of the idea for this episode, what he was eating at the time.
I know. I do. Now I just have to wonder, is there a deleted scene? Because if her name is Joy Almondo and you didn't shoot a scene where you have the Doctor reacting to that and making like a joke about it, I'd be very surprised. I do wonder if there's like a scene sitting in a vault somewhere where Shudigatwa has a field day with that. And it just got cut for time. But that is very funny that her name is Almondo. Yeah, and her whole... I think I agree. You also can kind of forgive it in the episode because you can just see built into the structure that you're not going to get a ton of time with her because of how the episode is built. And I think in some ways that works and in some ways it doesn't. Like, that's where I think the swing the final scene takes works for me 75%, and I think the remaining 25% is partially that the character, I don't know if we know her well enough for that moment to be fully earned, but it works well enough. I think the performance is good by Nicola Coughlan, who I haven't seen before, but she's good. And I did think it was interesting bringing in the COVID-19 stuff and people who died in isolation on COVID-19. I haven't seen all of the last 2 Chris Chibnall seasons, so I don't know if they ever brought in COVID into the... They didn't? Okay.
No.
So this is the first... This is the first acknowledgement of COVID in Doctor Who?
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting. It shouldn't have taken 5 years, but there we go. I mean, they got to it as fast as they could here in the Russell T Davies era, because this is only like the 10th episode. Well, for Shudigatwa, there's also the 3 Tennant ones. But anyway, I did think it was a good way to bring in the COVID acknowledgement and let it be a part of the story.
Yeah, like that stuff is worked for me, and I think that stuff was very effective. For me, it's when you have like where it really kind of goes very over the top is that whole at the very end where obviously so Joy turns into the Star or whatever. And somehow that she then like sucks up her mother's soul. Like, you know, the mechanics of it, I don't really give a shit. Because then the Doctor looks up and is like, joy to the world. And he sees where they are. You don't see it yet. He's like, ha ha ha. And he's laughing at like the cosmic irony of what's occurring here. And then you get the shot that to any like trained observer, you're going to realize, the idea is that she's become the Star of Bethlehem. But they can't leave it at that because then they literally say Bethlehem on the screen they say
stupid.
Year 1. Yeah. And it's like, okay. It's a lot. Like that's a lot to lay on. And it's, you know, like we don't have to, you know, as a non-religious person, you know, part of my head immediately goes to, but you know, do you know that's like that didn't happen. It's like, you know, again, it's like refer you to my top 2 Christmas things. You do know that Jesus wasn't actually born on Christmas, but whatever. It's not important.
Also, I learned researching the monthly 10 topic for later today, Sean, that most historians agree that the historical Jesus Christ would have been born circa 5 BC, not 1 AD, which is a weird quirk of history that he is born in the before Christ time. But there you go.
Yes, so it's like, it's, you know, that's not that important. It's just a thing that makes me roll my eyes a little bit. If I would have been more or less fine with it if they just left it at the visual implication.
I agree.
Where they are, like, having to put the fucking thing on the screen that says Bethlehem Year 1 is a real groan-worthy kind of moment for me, where I feel like, okay, you have gone over the line now. Like, you're towing that line, you were eyeing that line very deliciously, and then you leaped as far over it as you could with the extra title card.
It's dumb, but it's dumb in a way that I also find mildly endearing in a weird sense. It also raises the existential questions of, so this means in the fiction of Doctor Who, there is a Star of Bethlehem, there is a Jesus. Like, has the Doctor gone back and confirmed the divinity of Jesus in time travel? Like, what's going on there? And I also wonder, like, if you're deeply religious, is that sweet, or is that weirdly offensive that we're saying that, like, the alien starseed thing is what created the Star of Bethlehem? It's all very weird.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing where, like, if you think about it too much, I think it's insulting to everybody, right? That, like, you're both, like, implying this event is actually historically real and that these things really occurred, rather than being part of sort of a religious mythology. And then at the same time, you're also telling the people who believe and have faith in that, but the star is actually Nicola Coulin from 2024, and that is where the star, and that, like, it's also, the star is, like, created by, like, an interstellar, military industrial complex nightmare company, because the same company that's from the Boom episode from last season as well, that with the mines and all that, it's the same one that's trying to make their, like, crazy star, and that's what the Star of Bethlehem is. And so, yeah, I think if you think about it too much, it's sort of, it's when you're trying to make something the Star of Bethlehem, you're stepping into kind of like Lupin the Third, Jesus had a vampire sister kind of territory of, like, I don't know what the fuck's going on here anymore.
Yeah, but look, Sean, here's the answer. God works in mysterious ways. God wanted a star to guide the three wise men to Jesus, to Bethlehem, and so he worked through a weird weapons company that wanted to build a star, and he knew the Doctor would be out there to save the day, and, he puts the pieces on the board. God, he is divine, he is infinite, and he's bored sometimes. He's got to make some real Rube Goldbergian devices to get the star in the sky.
How crazy would it have been, though, if they had said Bethlehem, and they hang on that moment, and then they say 5 BC. And everyone's like, what?
And then there's an asterisk. Go to Wikipedia to learn more.
Yes. It's like, well, many historians agree that, technically speaking, blah, 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 blah.
Yes. Anyway, good episode. Murray Gold also, I think, is part of why the ending works as well as it does. Murray Gold just... As always, I feel like there's no idea too big that you can't throw at Murray Gold and he will not make work to some degree through the score. Like, there are bad episodes of Doctor Who that are redeemed by his music. This is a good one that I think some of its less good ideas are still redeemed by his music. It's a beautiful score. I'm so glad he is back on this thing because, man, just in the 21st century at least, it's not Doctor Who without Murray Gold. He is too tied to this fucking show. And I think its entire, like, language and how it functions and its sense of, like, particularly, like, Christmas maximalism at this time of the year. You just need his music. Yeah,
I think particularly for the Christmas specials, you need that extra schmaltz on top. And that's, like, he's doing that with the music, and it definitely works.
This is also, I feel like, the first episode of Ncuti Got Was Run where he's heavily used his cool new sonic screwdriver, and it is very cool. I do like that sonic a lot. I like how different it is. We've needed, I think, a change to the sonic screwdriver for a while, so it's very cool.
I agree, yes. I've always liked that design since they revealed it. But yeah, it never felt like he used it all that much in the show, and yeah, there's a lot more of it in this episode for sure.
I also like that we just have a random Silurian character in the episode, but it's not an episode about the Silurians. And there is that moment that's astonishing. This is one of those things Ncuti Gatwa can do so well, where the Silurian character is dying, and he's, like, there comforting him through death, but also feeling the loss of this, like, ancient being. And just, I don't know if there's any other Doctor who can quite turn on a dime that hard, from we're rollicking, we're fun, we're swashbuckling, to I'm crying one tear out of my beautiful eye while I hold your hand while you die. That is something the 15th Doctor is very good at. And I like that. I feel like we've seen that a couple of times since RTD came back, where it's like, well, what monster, like, costumes and makeup do we have ready for just a random character on the side? And I like just bringing back old characters because, we are pro-Silurian here at the Purely Academic podcast because they've been in, like, 2 episodes, but they're 2 really good episodes.
Yeah. Silurians are great. Yeah, and particularly like that modern Silurian design has, it's just such a like a home run of like prosthetic effects. It's so good looking. And this episode continues the run of like the production is very nice. Like that Time Hotel set looks gorgeous. Obviously they've got like a shit ton of all these random little sets they have for all the different rooms that the Doctor is going into, and all that stuff looks great. They've got their CGI dinosaur sequence, which, it's not like the most incredible CGI I've ever seen, but it's probably the best CGI, like, certainly it's the best dinosaur we have seen in Doctor Who. And there have been a fair number of dinosaurs going all the way back to at least to the Invasion of the Dinosaurs, the John Pertwee episode where they were toys.
When it's the full body dinosaur, it's like good, not great CGI. When they're falling into its mouth and it's a close up on the dino's head, that looks great. Like that looks almost like one of the animatronics from Jurassic Park. It's like very detailed. They knew where to put the money in that sequence, so that was very good.
Yeah. Although unfortunately, they didn't put any of that money to giving that T-Rex the feathers that it deserves, because dinosaurs have feathers because they are ancient birds. And I will never stop hitting that. This is my soapbox. It's the hill I will die on. The new modern Jurassic Park's fucked up the moment they weren't like, and we're going to put feathers on these goddamn dinosaurs. God damn it.
There's another one coming out this year with Scarlett Johansson in the lead, and maybe it's time they'll finally do it. Who knows? I
want tiny ass velociraptors, and I want them with feathers, and none of this huge ass velociraptors bullshit. It's bullshit. It's not. We know better. We know that.
I saw the first Jurassic World, and I think, and this would have enraged you, and this is why I remember it, they have a stupid line where one of the guys says, like, yeah, we know they had feathers, but we genetically engineered them not to have feathers so people would recognize the dinosaurs. I'm like, oh, fuck you. Fuck you, movie. Don't even mention, if you're going to do it, just don't even try to explain it in the plot. Anyway.
You also mentioned why they made velociraptors really big and have little frilled dudes shoot acid, even though we know they didn't do that either.
Yeah. Anyway, Doctor Who, we're very glad it's back. This is a good one. I'm glad Stephen Moffat has been playing in the sandbox this year. It was a good end to a good year for the show. And I'll steam ahead to season 2 of the new era, which is season 15 overall, I think. But actually season 40-something. It's weird at this point. Now the seasons have 3 different fucking numbers. So it's 41. This is season 41, Sean.
It's season 2 in my head. I think we just got to roll with resetting the numbers. I think is honestly a good idea at this point, because it's too much. It's hard to keep track at this point.
Yes, so we're going to see I thought the little trailer they aired with the episode was good, and I'm excited to see more stuff, and it's a good era. And again, we haven't talked about it too much. There is a little bit of uncertainty, because while they made the first 2 seasons for Gatwa back-to-back. They basically did the David Tennant specials and these 2 Gatwa seasons all in one big go in 2022 and 2023. They haven't made anything since, and it's not clear whether Disney is ordering more or what the future will be. I hope that doesn't result in a weird, I don't know, like Colin Baker, Sylvester McCoy-esque scenario where it all gets cut off early before it's time. But we'll see. Russell T Davies is projecting confidence publicly. I think he probably would be either way, because that's kind of his job to do that. But we'll enjoy it while it lasts, I guess is what I'll say.
Yeah, we'll see how this pans out. Like the modern things are not good for TV shows right now. It's kind of just like, or at least for like live action TV shows in particular, it is not a good. Streaming has not been great.
Streaming has not been great, although I think Doctor Who is well positioned. I think one thing while I have been enjoying the heightened production values of these episodes, I would also say that I think part of how Doctor Who could adapt to the modern landscape is to go in the other direction. I would say take that money and make double the episodes. I think if Doctor Who were turning out like 13 to 16 episodes, it could catch a lot of attention, because we are heading into an era where there's a lot of streaming shows that are getting bigger episode orders because everyone has recognized the 6 to 8 episodes every 3 years thing is not working for anybody. It's not working for people who need jobs in the industry. It's not working for viewers who forget these shows exist. And I don't think Doctor Who is built to have 8 episodes. I think the last season did it pretty well, because the 8 episodes were mostly very good. But I think we felt like at the end, like Ruby Sunday and Doctor's relationship, it didn't feel fully articulated yet, because they'd only had 8 episodes, and some of them were special episodes where they did other things, which you want Doctor Who to experiment, but you also need some normal episodes where they just do, random adventure of the week and they become friends. So I think Doctor Who would be well positioned to go in that direction and just make more episodes and try to be big in that way and be the kind of episodic TV show that people do clearly crave when you look at the streaming numbers. They want shows with more episodes. But we'll see. Doctor Who has trended ever since 2005 when it came back towards fewer episodes, higher production values. It was a slow progression over time, but that's where we've gotten. And I do wonder if that needs to snap back. Maybe Shudigawa is not the actor who can do that because he's very in demand. Maybe you need to go back to the kind of TV character actor who can do mini episodes a year and not worry about it. I'm not sure, but it's, to be clear, as you're saying, Sean, this is not just a Doctor Who problem. This is a what is TV in 2025 problem, and I think everybody is experiencing that.
Yes, and luckily Doctor Who is a very resilient and elastic show. It has evolved a lot over the years. Yes. A lot. It has worn many different faces, both figuratively and literally. And so, yeah, like I'm sure that even I hope that Shudigawa stays around at least for 3 seasons. It would be so sad if he was some sort of 2-season Doctor. It'd just feel absolutely tragic. I think he could, obviously, he's more than good enough to stay around for even more than that. But yes, like I think the Doctor Who will continue to be a thing. I just hope that Shudigawa gets his full go at it, and doesn't just get kind of consumed by the weird shifts in trends in TV, in streaming TV and stuff that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, absolutely.